Please note that this episode of Here We Are Now is introduced by Justin Bennis. Ours will not be pronounced properly. Mistakes will be made, but man, he just gives it his best shot. Now, here's Justin to talk about Jaws.
Thalassophobia? Thalassophobia is designed as the persistent fear of vast, deep, and often dark bodies of water that feel dangerous. Specifically, thalassophobia Thalassophobia is defined as the persistent fear of vast, deep, and often dark bodies of water that feel dangerous. Specifically, thalassophobia describes a person's fear of the great unknown and the water right below their feet. Right now, in the summer of 2023, there are many reasons to hang on to that anxiety. From submersibles that deliver a horrible deep undersea death, to the severed human feet that keep washing ashore in Washington. In the Gulf of Mexico, there's an underwater lake full of methane, called the hot tub of despair, that kills any organism that enters it. Galileophobia. What? Galleophobia, or the fear of sharks, comes from the Greek words gallios, for sharks, and phobos, for fear. Symptoms may include anxiety, with elevated heart rate, shortness of breath, shaking, sweating, nausea, or dizziness.
You know this is going to
Dizziness.
an audience, people. Right? An audience of people.
Every year, only around 80 unprovoked shark attacks are reported worldwide. Despite how rare they are, many people fear sharks after occasional serial attacks such as the Jersey Shore shack attacks of 1916, and films such as Deep Blue Sea and The Meg. And oh yeah. Jaws is adapted from the author Peter Benchley's best-selling novel of the same name, which Benchley's based on... Peter Benchley wrote a book, the best-selling novel of the same name, which Benchley based on a series of shark attacks that occurred off the coast of New Jersey in 1916, and after an accident where a New York fisherman named Frank Mundus caught a 4,500-pound shark off the coast of Montauk in 1964. The stories behind the making of Jaws have been told, and retold many times. There are documentaries, podcasts, YouTube channels devoted to only telling these stories. And as you know, that is not what this series, Here We Are Now, is about. Rather, we dive deep into the human experiences of the creators that may have influenced the art. So with that out of the way, let's take a bite out of Jaws. As we said, the original book was written by Peter Benchley. After a lot of research, we just can't find a smoking gun in his life that may have compelled him to write a book about a shark. But maybe Benchley felt the need to write a book about sharks after swimming in the sharks of politics as President Johnson's speechwriter at the height of Vietnam. On to the movie. Director Steven Spielberg was only 28 years old at the time of the Jaws production and found himself in a sink-or-swim position, and yes, Matt tried it again. In 1971, Spielberg made an acclaimed TV movie called Duel, about a man being chased by a truck. Now he found himself drawn to a similar story. Years later, Spielberg would say he wondered why he made films with these Leviathans? Leviathans targeting the everyman.
Isn't it supposed to be everyman?
I would say so.
Everyman?
Yeah. We can chalk this
Did
up
Matt
to someone
write
else.
this?
Yeah, I'm reading Matt's script.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, this makes a little more sense now.
Yeah, no, I got it. Okay.
You may find your own answers to these questions by watching Spielberg's recent biographical film, The Fabelmans, or maybe Steven felt that the monster chasing him was failure. Nearly 50 years later, we all know who won that contest. Spielberg brought other writers on to help Benchley with the screenplay. Carl Gottlieb?
Gottlieb.
Yeah, Carl and Howard Sackler. Gottlieb was mainly a comedy writer, but Sackler was a Tony and Pulitzer Prize winning playwright.
Sorry, that's one shit.
It was Sackler that brought in the famous scene in which Quint talks about his experience aboard the USS Indianapolis. In a movie full of great action scenes and shark attacks, this dialogue between three men is for many the best in the movie. Men comparing their scars and their experiences, but Brody stops short of sharing. Why? Would you need to be a cop to understand? What happened in the city that led a police officer afraid of the water to a seaside town? The legendary speech given by Quint in this scene has a lot behind it. First, the writing of it remains a mystery. Sackler wrote a first draft, but John Milius did a polish on it. You may know John Milius from films such as Conan the Barbarian and Red Dawn, so if you could get Arnold to say something, he can do anything. John wished to serve in the military, but after being denied, could there have been a part of him that focused on claiming some military glory through these characters? This brings us to Robert Shaw, the actor who brings Quint to life, and death as Shark Lunch. Jesus, man. Shaw is known for films such as The Sting and Dr. No, as well as Jaws, of course. But he was also a celebrated writer of novels and plays. Being a writer, he took a turn at rewriting the speech as well. Regardless of how much he actually wrote, what is important is the humanity and reality that you feel in his performance here. When Robert was 12, his father committed suicide. At the time of filming this scene, his wife was months away from dying from a drug overdose. Robert himself was a lifelong alcoholic and died only 3 years after Jaws was released from a heart attack.
Very first light, Chief. Sharks come cruising. So we formed ourselves into tight groups. You know, it's kind of like old squares in a battle, like you see in a calendar, like the Battle of Waterloo, and the idea was shark comes to the nearest man, that man he starts pounding and hollering and screaming. Sometimes the shark would go away. Sometimes he wouldn't go away. Sometimes that shark, he looks right into you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces.
When John Williams brought his ideas for music to Jaws to Spielberg and played him the iconic two-note riff,
Da-dum. Da-dum.
Spielberg laughed, just like I'm gonna with Chris. He thought John was joking because it was so simple.
I expected to hear something kind of weird and melodic, you know, and really kind of tonal but eerie and of another world, almost a bit like outer space, inside, you know, inner space, under the water. And what he played me instead with two fingers on the lower keys was dun 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 dun. And at first I began to laugh. I thought he had a great sense of humor. I thought he was putting me on. And he said, no, that's the theme to Jaws. And I said, play it again. He played it again. And he played it again. And it suddenly seemed right.
Later, the soundtrack to Jaws would win the Academy Award for Best Score and put John Williams into the stratosphere, along with Spielberg, who continues to work together. What you may not know, though, is John Williams' wife Barbara passed away in 1974. This left John and his 3 children to fend for themselves as John tried to further his career.
When I was about 40 years old, I lost somebody very, very, very close to me unexpectedly. And before that point in my life, I didn't know what I was doing. But after that point, in my writing and my approach to music and everything that I was doing, I felt clear about what it is I was trying to do and how I could do it with whatever small gift I may have been given. Mm-hmm. It was a huge emotional turning point in my life. Let's leave it there, but one that resonates with me still and taught me about who I was and what I was doing and what it meant. And this is a deeply emotional thing, and in a way, that was the greatest gift ever given to me, if I can put it that way, by anyone. A pivotal moment in my thinking and my living of my life and approaching the blank page, absolutely. I immediately knew where to go with this emotionally.
His music became more emotional, with stronger melodies and deeper connection to the listener. While she was alive, Barbara urged John to finish a violin concerto. It may be some of the most beautiful music of his career, yet least heard. So side by side with the explosion of hard-won success in John's career was the shock and tragedy of his reality. Can you hear this emotion in the music of Jaws? I think you can. Jaws presents us with a deep musical soundtrack to all 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Let's sink our teeth into Jaws in this latest episode of Here We Are Now, with me, Justin Bennis, and Matt Collette.
Welcome to Here We Are Now, a series that looks at what life experiences went into the creation of your favorite art and why we love it. Here's your host, Matt Collette, to uncover the connection between music, movies, and mental health.
Hey, welcome to Here We Are Now, where we talk about mental health and how it affects our movies and music and the things that we absorb, and then why we're all into it. And of course, my chicken pot pie recipes, which will be the bulk of this particular episode because I've got a humdinger of a pot pie recipe, that is. All right, we are joined today by Sergeant Justin Bennis, who is part of a unnamed police force. Hi, Sergeant Justin Bennis.
What's up, Matt?
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Hi. Well, you said hi. I'll say hi back.
It's going to be a hell of a show.
It's going to be fantastic.
It's going to be good. Adjectives, whatever comes to mind. Okay? Okay.
All right.
Today, Justin, well, he's been asking for months, but he is a Jaws person. He likes the movie Jaws. I do as well. It's not my favorite Spielberg, but I can see how it really got his career going. So it came out in 1975. It's based on a book which is, in my opinion, not that great.
No, it's terrible.
Yeah, by Peter Benchley, and most of the book isn't part of the movie. They focus on the third act. He's actually in the movie. He plays a reporter. So in order to get the movie to where it is, they had to bring in all these writers and a comedy writer, and we'll get into that. But may I ask you, Sergeant Justin Bennis, of a city that will remain unnamed, why Jaws does it for you?
I just think it speaks to a lot of law enforcement in general. Just Brody and his wife, Martin and was it Ellen? Like how the dynamic between the husband and wife has to be for it to work, and the responsibility that you have to the community, but there's also politics and your own fears. So I just think that there's a lot underneath that makes it a very distinct cop movie, even though it's not a buddy cop movie in New York with Bruce Willis or something.
Did you love this movie as a kid before?
Yeah,
I assume that
yeah,
you
I
were
loved it.
not born with a gun and a badge.
Absolutely not. No.
Okay.
No. Was not my thing growing up. I didn't really want to be a cop. Never really even crossed my mind until about 9/11 when I was in college. And that's when it started to kind of make some sense to me. But when I was in college and I decided to do it, I started working down on Cape Cod. And then I got into that. I had always gone to the Cape in general anyway. I had been to Martha's Vineyard before and liked the movie. So we'd seen some of the places where it had been filmed, but it never really spoke to me until an older guy on the job in the Cape, he would kind of just drive me around when I was like this 19, 20-year-old college student. And he would say, you're going to spend a couple of years here trying to get to that city, and you're going to spend 30 years in that city trying to come back here. I'm like, yeah. And here I am, 40 years old, counting down the days, thinking that would be a heck of a retirement plan. So I've always said, I want the Jaws retirement plan. I want to drive around on a Blazer in the sand. That would be pretty cool.
Justin is actually a blood relative of mine. So when he comes out to visit me, I live by the South Bay of California. He spends most of his time just quietly looking at the ocean and just, and then he'll say, I could do this.
That happens.
But it's interesting to me that, Chief Brody, I keep making this the X-Files. Chief Brody was a New York City cop, which I imagine in the early 70s was pretty tough. We've all seen like American Gangster with Denzel, which I love. And then he came to Amity, which by the way is not a real town, everyone. It was filmed in Martha's Vineyard, which is adjacent to Cape Cod in Massachusetts, for those of you that are unaware of the United States of America. And Justin said something which I'll let him get to later about showing our scars when he and Quint and Hooper are kind of showing the scars that they've gotten on the job or in their life. I just thought that was interesting that Justin brought it up. But you can imagine what the Roy Scheider character of Brody would have experienced as a cop in New York City at that time, which I imagine led to him being a cop in Amity. And there's a scene in the movie when it's hitting the fan, and the Roy Scheider character says to his wife that we're going home, and she says New York, and he said no, or here, our home in Amity, and she just kind of leaves the lobby in the hospital, obviously upset, and she wants to go back to New York. So maybe, I don't know, he got caught in some kind of Serpico, situation and had to leave, or maybe he had some sort of trauma. Something bad happened in New York, I think, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's funny you say that, because when I looked at what she did for that nod, she stops and gives him a nod, grabs their son and walks out. I looked at it as an understanding, like, okay, if you're good with it, I'm good with it. And it was this moment between a husband and a wife who clearly understands his struggle, his mental health. Like, I think they left New York because of whatever happened to him. And so she's supporting him. She's like, "Oh, New York?" He's like, "No, here." And she gave him this look like, "Okay, I got you," and takes the kid and goes. And it wasn't. It was a show of support, is how I saw it, from her. Which, as a cop who's worked in a city for a long time, I didn't grow up in a police family, so I didn't really understand what's going to happen to you after. I have about 16 years in law enforcement now. I've worked as a dispatcher in small towns. I've worked as a police officer in small towns. I've worked on a Cape. I've worked inside one of the most notorious maximum security prisons in America. And I've worked in a major city for the bulk of the career doing city work. I've been in the gang units, the SWAT team, regular patrol, night shift only. So, you tend to see a lot. And, when you start this type of thing, you don't realize what it means that mental health and policing really is. You think it's, oh, I'm going to see dead bodies. Oh, I'm going to see people hurt. I'm going to see blood. You expect that going in. And I have to say that although it affects you, it's part of the expected behavior of work. My wife's a special ed teacher, and she talks about expected behavior and not expected behavior. And that's, so I use that a lot in what I do. And you expect to see the end result of crime and sadness often. What you don't expect to see is your partner die of cancer. You don't expect to see someone you trained and worked with die on the job. You don't expect to see their lifeless body, someone you just spoke with, that you hang out with, that they're friends. You don't expect to have a friend commit suicide. Those are the things that, really compound over the years. You expect to get into a fight with a bad guy, or even wrestle a gun off somebody, which I got into an incident with. But you don't expect the newspapers to take it and run with it. You don't expect your parents to hear about it, your wife to hear about it, your kids to figure it out as they get older and have to listen to the police report about what I went through. You don't expect your kids' friends to Google your name and ask your kids about what happened to you in school, and your kids to have to come home and go, "Dad, did that really happen?" Yeah, that sort of stuff. And you see that. I think I have so much more respect for Roy Scheider as an actor as I got older seeing this movie, because you see that in him. I do, and I think any cop that's done this thing for a little while can see it, and that's what I like about the movie. I mean, the beach and the sharks and the boats, it's fun, but what you see is a guy keeping it together for his wife and kids, and still trying to be able to do his job correctly. Like it takes him getting drunk and driven out into the middle of nowhere in the dark for him to say, in Amity, one man can make a difference, and it's not the general saying that any cop would ever say, like, "Oh, I'm here to make a difference." But when you go in that way with an altruistic mission, if you would, and all these things happen, it would be kind of nice to find a position where people say thank you, where you do the right thing and there is no gray area. So seeing him move to Amity, like, yeah, I could see pretty much any city cop or anybody who's had a long run in law enforcement feel the same way as him.
Plus, amity means friendship.
Friendship, yeah.
For those of you that may work in law enforcement or in mental health or an ER or something, you'll understand what I'm about to say. For the rest of you, hang on tight. So, Justin and I, in different ways, but in many ways that are the same, are sometimes in environments and situations that would probably seem extreme, or out of a movie, are just incredibly devastating or sad or traumatic. And we have chosen each other as the person that we go to. So we send to text each other things about movies, are like, I'm dealing with this horrible situation right now. And then we just give each other shit, basically, which is healthy, especially for those of us in an unnamed part of the country where sarcastic deflection is just simply how we get through things. But that's actually very normal. A lot of the therapists that I work with do the same thing. Um, we had an incident in front of my house. I didn't tell you this, but there was a hit and run. They hit some kid on a bike, and I don't know if he made it or not. And I'm out there to check things out. I have a son myself, so I'm like, oh, what's going on? And that, if you were just a regular bystander and you had heard them talking about what they're getting for burgers afterwards, that might seem like they're disconnected, and they are not. They are not disconnected. They're trying to stay in the zone and in the job and having conversations, because if you just talk about this horrible thing and this thing died and we have to, what do they say in the movie, we're gonna what is it when the little boy falls out of the shark, what's the line?
Some kind of half-assed autopsy.
Yeah, if you just talk about that, you're not going to make it in the gig. Yeah. And like Justin said, he's 16 years, and I'm oh my god, 20 years this year. Wow, I'm getting some wrinkles. It's all right.
Yeah, I feel them too.
Don't smoke and don't drink though. So I'm getting through it. Pizza tastes fantastic and coffee is delicious. But that is why movies like this and music or what have you, it's not just entertainment. It really is. To me, it's vital. And it's really funny to me that this movie and movies like this become part of pop culture, and they make toys, and there's these horrible sequels in 3D, Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah, I was gonna hope you were gonna mention that. Yeah, it's all sharks and boats.
I see you, and you are special.
It's got 3 barrels,
It does have, yeah. We see it. It's very good, Justin. We all see it.
Yeah. Well, I was excited for today.
But it's just funny that, like, to me, all these years later, it doesn't feel like a blockbuster summer movie. It feels like, Jesus, this guy's dealing with some trauma, and we got like dead kids and real emotions, which I don't, outside of some Iron Man moments, I don't feel in other things. I think I've seen all the Transformers movies, but I haven't like seen them. They're just happening. Yeah. And but this movie is truly about something, which I think is why Spielberg is the king of the mountain, because he can make a movie about a shark and make you feel it for 50 years, or a movie about, an alien that crash lands and it makes grown men cry. You know what I mean? Because it's
Right.
not about that. And this movie obviously isn't about a shark.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
I'll let Justin take it from here. Um, but it let's talk about what the shark is, buddy. What is the shark?
Consequence. I think it's, I think you view the shark like he went to Amity to get away from a lot of that stuff, the problems, and realistically, the shark I think represents like that. It's danger is always there, whether it's the job or life. That the sharks, you know, it's always around the corner, and you can't just run from your problems. But the only way to kind of handle it is to get it face on.
And if you don't face it, um, you know, a lot of people or a lot of tough guys, we just kind of leave it in our gut, and it just grows and grows and grows, and eventually will eat the entire town of Amity.
Right, and
If
it
you,
would have ruined his career, right? And if it ruined his career, he'd go back to New York. So he had to force. I mean, he had to face this, and what I find interesting about policing and what happened, with Brody was that the mayor put it on him when it worked for him, but the mayor would only take credit if it was going to do well, and the townspeople wanted the problem solved and people to be safe, but they didn't want to close the beaches. So it felt as though everything landed on him, and it's easy to say, well, I'm public safety, so you're going to be safe, nobody in the water. And the consequences now that the mayor's mad at him, and so I found that to be very realistic in policing, that there's what you do and what might be correct, and then what's the optics, and there's a level of stress there, particularly in the last several years in policing, that it's glaringly obvious that there's a correlation between the movie and what would be the simple answer, but yet what else is going on, what are the social dynamics of the town and the people going on. And it becomes very obvious that he's the one holding the bag when Mrs. Kittner comes up and hits him, and he's honest enough to himself when the mayor says, something to the effect that don't listen to her, or, she's wrong. And he's like, no, she isn't. She's 100% right. And it's just him saying, I should have stuck by my convictions, but I listened to this mayor who has his own self-interests, and the town, wanting kind of both sides, to be safe and to be able to make money. And so I think a lot fell on his shoulders. And I think a lot of cops, feel that way at some point in their career.
it's if you want to make life more interesting, people, whenever you see a news conference of a politician or maybe a chief of police or what have you, and there's an issue, don't focus on the person at the microphone. Look at like the cops that they put on the line, or anybody, a firefighter or a line of doctors, and look for the one face that's saying so much more than the person at the microphone. That's something that I've done since I was a kid, and I think a lot of these movies taught me that. But like, there's a lot of things going on in those panels, and a lot of context, and a lot of maybe uh, ethical things going on internally. It's really hard to do this kind of work. We're not going to make this political because I just want to enjoy my life. But to be both the person that is meant to save and be the target at the same time, it's hard to be Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. And that's the job. And for me, to a different level, because when I go into a home, I'm automatically not trusted in what I'm doing, even though I might be coming in there to do arts and music. I'm viewed as an outsider, so then I have to win that trust through action and context and showing up. But it's different for me than a cop, because you just have that one moment. Maybe it's 2 or 3 minutes of something happening, and then it's done, and they're going to be thinking about that for weeks and months, and then with their lawyers.
And typically when you're called, you're not seeing people, we always joke like people don't call the cops just to tell you that they're having a great day. You know, they call you when it's usually someone's worst day. So it's,
you're
you're behind the starting line with that. And, I mean, it's interesting because you start walking around, and whether at a coffee shop or a restaurant, and you have your gun, your badge, it's just part of what you wear, your radio. And you don't realize no one else, it's hard to explain, but people see that first, way before they see you, and you tend to forget, like, why are they so taken aback, and then you realize it's because I have a firearm, and it's right out in front, and the badge represents my ability to take people's freedom away. And, obviously way more than just that, but the fact that there's a gun, handcuffs, and a badge says this person, can be a threat, and I just want a coffee.
Yeah.
And so you're not thinking that way. And when you're younger as a police officer, I feel like it's a little more confusing. And as you get older, you speak to more people and say, well, that's just how I feel. It doesn't mean I don't like cops. Just that's what, we're not around guns like you are. And so as you get older, you recognize it a little bit more, and you have more patience for it. And you can see that even when Ellen says, when do I get to be an Islander? And they said, never. And it's like, well, not just because she didn't grow up here, but you're also the chief's wife. We're always set a little bit aside. I definitely noticed that in COVID, for my wife and kids, where we were a little bit, I was out there in the middle of it all, and people were afraid. People were afraid just to be near me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wearing a mask, but I am out there, and people didn't know what it was, but you add that little element of fear to something, and you really get to see how people react, and my wife and kids never really noticed it like that before. I sure did, but with something like COVID, it kind of changed the game.
I've done a couple of ride-alongs with Justin, and a couple of years ago we stopped at a
Just me slipping and falling, getting out of the car.
We didn't have to talk about that.
I did,
but
it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, the sergeant. What do we got? Boom! And I was so happy to be there with him because we get to bring it up. But then
New England in the winter, it's gonna happen.
You can have your excuses. You fell down. You fell down. It's okay. Confront your shark. Okay.
You got to get back up.
He got back up, and we went in there, and leaving any details out, there was a child, and it was a bad experience, and it's late at night, and all these cops are coming in. I'm not a police officer. Usually I'm wearing a hat right now, but I'll have longish hair and this and that. And I just saw a little kid, and nobody was speaking to him. So I sat down with him, and we talked about, I think it was Spider-Man, and what his favorite Spider-Man cartoon or movie was. And it worked for a few minutes while everybody's walking around and doing their thing and trying to, find evidence, and I believe the perp. But that is the power of art. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby came up with a teenager that they gave spider powers, and 50 years later, 60 years later, I'm talking to a little boy in a traumatic situation, and that's what can pull him out of it for a moment or give him a sense of relief. And later he'll find things to help him in his adult life, whether it's Jaws or wearing, I imagine, an overpriced Jaws Hawaiian shirt.
Wildly overpriced.
Did I get that for you?
No, I spent my own hard-earned money on this.
Did you?
Yeah, it was like $70-something. It was way too much money.
Specific. It's okay.
Well, now I'm not proud of it, okay. But I like the shirt.
You don't put it in the dryer, do you?
No.
Okay. Don't put your Hawaiian shirts in the dryer, folks. Okay. Thank you. Well, PSA. So yeah, that's the power of this. So speaking of that, for me, the main thrust of this, because I'm into music and John Williams is my god, He should be yours too. I don't want to get into religion, but the guy's done it. He doesn't talk about his private life, which is kind of rare nowadays and refreshing. But he had his children and was married with this wonderful woman, and she passed away in 1974. She passed away on the set of a film, and John Williams, his career was really building. And although he did do one score for the Towering Inferno, which is Paul Newman, it's not great. Like, I love it. Uncle Andy probably loves it. It's okay, but it's not something we're gonna do a show about, right? And then he started to write a concerto, not for a film, but for his wife. That's never really been released, but to me, it's the most beautiful thing he's ever done. But I think at that moment, he started to get more personal with his music, which brings us to Jaws, which is also, at that point, the most successful film music ever released. Like, people kept buying the soundtrack record, and it definitely made him the John Williams that we know, right? But when he first brought the music to Steven Spielberg, it's just F and E. We all know it. Na, 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 na. Spielberg laughed because he thought he was joking because it's such a simple thing. But speaking of confronting stuff and dealing with things, I can't help but think that Williams saw the shark as, dealing with the death of his wife and the mother of his children, and trying to keep his career going and being a single parent while working hard, building your career. And there are moments in the soundtrack that people don't talk about that are incredibly beautiful. And John Williams spoke about it, and I have it right here. Okay. He said, "It was a huge emotional turning point in my life, but one that resonates with me still. And it taught me about who I was and what I was doing and what it meant. This is a deeply emotional thing, and in a way, that was the greatest gift ever given to me, if I can put it that way, by anyone," he said. "I immediately knew where to go with this emotionally." And he's talking about Jaws. And his wife, he finally spoke about her loss in 2014, and he said, "Before that point in my life, I didn't know what I was doing. But after that, in my writing and in what I was doing, it was clear what I was trying to do and how I could do it with whatever small gift I may have been given." So you can't talk about Jaws without talking about the music. I mean, the dana dana has become a joke, but it's really good. It's amazing, and I think without that music, you don't have the movie.
Yeah, I agree.
It might become more obvious that the shark isn't working, or what have you. So to me, this movie is about John Williams dealing with the death of his wife and what life is going to be now, while going, I can really, really write this music now. He might not say better than anybody else, but I will. Better than anybody else. John Williams. This is his moment, and all people, eventually, if you're lucky, you hit that moment in your life when you either do the thing or you don't. And I'm happy to have that moment in my life. I know Justin has had his, and I think that was the moment for John Williams. And for Spielberg, I'm sure we've all seen The Fabelmans and his upbringing, but this movie was not easy for him because he was still a kid, and to the point where he was 100 days over schedule, which was unheard of, especially for this nobody director. and he thought the crew was going to throw him off the boat on the last day of shooting, so he wasn't there, and that became a running thing with Spielberg, which he's not there usually on the last day of filming. That's become one of his
Trademarks. Yeah.
yeah. And when you work in those high pressure situations, doesn't matter if you're spiritual or not, you always have these superstitions of, well, I have to wear this shirt, or I'm not going to do this because it worked last time. It's just kind of how you survive. Justin hasn't taken off the Hawaiian shirt in 3 years, for example.
It's a power shirt, you know.
Yeah, we're all proud of you, buddy. We think you do.
I
it.
appreciate that.
So that's the John Williams thing. That's what I wanted to come to. So I recommend listening to the soundtrack Beyond the F and the E. It's an ostinato for those of you that are into music. And I know that they just released a really killer double vinyl set. I think Mondo put it out. If you enjoy vinyl, for the artwork alone, it's probably $8,000 now. I don't know. Mine was like about the same as his shirt, I think. But I wear the album too, so I really try.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
it's got to be a big album.
Don't try that either. All right, I want to go into the Indianapolis speech, which for me that's what this movie is, and that's, if you had to make like a play of this movie, that would be the moment, and the older I get, the more I appreciate it. And that is something, again, that you would not see in I don't know I keep saying Transformers, but you know what I mean, like because they're made by committee, and that just felt like a very human experience moment that they put in this film. So I'm just curious what you think of that, especially the conversation starts with comparing our scars.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of those things that I found that Brody spoke to cops that have been through some stuff, and I don't think a cop with a couple of years will get it, but someone who's been down that road a couple of times would. And they're showing scars to Quint and help me out here. Hooper, thank you. Quint and Hooper are talking about, scars from a thresher shark or a arm wrestling thing, and and then Mary Ellen Moffat broke his heart, and that they're joking and drinking, and the cop is on the side, just watching, like they do, and he'd like to be involved in the conversation, but every time we're at a party and someone wants to hear our stuff, we kind of bum people out. Like, oh, I just was in something where someone said, "What's your funniest story?" It had to do with drug addiction, so it's not that great. Not often is it that funny. And so he's watching, and then he gets like the idea to maybe bring something up, and he notices he has a scar, and he pulls up his shirt and looks, and you can see what looks like a surgical scar, as if one were to be shot and then sewn back up. And then he realizes, he puts it back down, and then just lets them do their thing. And that showed me something about, the police officer at the party, going to different events. And yeah, tell me your story, your crazy story. Oh, you don't want to know mine. And as soon as you say that, everybody wants to know. Well, it was a double homicide. And then you start talking about your story. And before you know it, they're like, okay, maybe not, and it brings the party down, or people go silent. So oftentimes the cop just walks peripherally around those conversations, and, maybe they can try to bring something to the table, but it would not be from police work itself.
I just thought of something that when you're talking about him not speaking of his scar, our grandfather that we call Jaja was in the Korean War. It wasn't a conflict, folks. A lot of people died. It's a war, and we didn't win. But he was sent there as a kid, and he lost his right hand, but kept his thumb. And a uh, straight up grenade, right?
Yep.
Yep.
They threw it back.
And he found, I think, all four fingers and put it in his vest. And then this is very cold, and he's trying to evade the North Koreans. Had to go downriver, found a mash unit, and he had a thumb. Came home, built his house, had his family, was a firefighter, and had a very hands-on job. I'm not making a joke. Like, it was a working the roads in New England during February is not fun. It's real work. And he never spoke about the hand. I never really ever thought about it, to be honest with you. I was like, oh, it's Jaja, and you know, and so I think in that way he reminds me of Chief Brody. He just didn't bring it up until Justin actually it was for school, right? And he did a
Yeah.
report, and then they finally gave him a Purple Heart, but he never mentioned it. And they gave him a Purple Heart, and
In the 90s, not
yeah,
not in the 50s or 60s,
yeah.
in 1996, I think.
So speaking of, talking about your scars and what all that means, and again, not getting political, but you know, uh I feel like we might be in a I might have to edit this part out. A society that lines up to scream about the smallest scar or a perceived scar. Everybody in that room would be showing a paper cut, or I ripped my shirt a little bit, or I chipped a nail in 2023. But in 1975, these men had some real stuff to talk about or not talk about. And I think we might be gravitating towards that as well. Nobody was triggered in that room. They all just kind of spoke. Yeah, I'll be editing this part. Okay. I like when you get quiet. All right, so Robert Shaw, who plays Quint and is amazing, I just found out was like my age when he made this. Okay. And at the same time he was making this movie, his wife died of an overdose. And he and his wife were both like just serious alcoholics. So he was dealing with that. She died right after production, but before the movie came out. And his father committed suicide as well. So I think he definitely brings that into the speech. And Robert Shaw was a renowned playwright as well. Like, he had two
Renowned
novels.
alcoholic because of it.
Absolutely. But he was a writer. So
Yeah.
this first guy, I think, was it Sackler? John Sackler. Yeah, I remembered. Wrote the initial outline of the Indianapolis. Then this badass named John Milius that I want to do a show about sometime, that Spielberg knew, came in and brought his stuff into it. And he is like a real macho guy, this and that. But he was denied entry into the military to go to Vietnam. And I think that bugged him. So this gave him a chance to, not stolen valor, but maybe to give a character the sense of that or what have. He went on to make Conan the Barbarian, so the guy's fan, and Red Dawn. So John Milius,
Ooh, I
everybody.
like that.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
But mostly to me, it's they gave it, and Robert Shaw looked at it and made the last changes. So when I hear the speech, I think he's talking about his wife, who he knew was in a downward spiral, his own alcoholism, his dad's suicide, and Robert Shaw died 3 years after this came out. So this is towards the end of his life. So it's amazing, and I think it's the best performance he's ever given, and maybe one of the best acting I've seen on film. And he did not win an Academy Award, which is all right, cool. But that obviously was a real thing in World War II, and they had delivered the bomb, and then they got sunk and eaten by sharks. And I kept thinking, this is a great movie. There should be a movie in World War II that follows Quint, right, and his buddies delivering the atomic bomb that they sent to Japan, and then they get eaten by sharks. What a movie. And it turns out
It's coming out.
They made one. And I saw it. It's a direct to like Redbox
Oh, really?
Netflix
That's why I've
thing.
been waiting for it to come out.
It's Nicolas Cage, and you know he owes a lot of people a lot of money, so he makes every movie. I still love him, but it wasn't really a movie, if you know what I mean. Like you
Yeah.
could tell it was rushed and let's get this done. But what a great story! What a great American story! And if you can tie that in to Jaws without it being a prequel, but Quint just happens to be there, that'd be great. But
Mm.
I just think that scene is should be studied in acting school and film school and all of that. And I think a lesser director would have cut that out of the movie, or they would have shown a flashback to the scene. But just looking at their faces and their reactions is, to me, just as exciting as the shark attacks. You know.
Yeah.
But,
I think on a side note to that too, with Robert Shaw, his acting, I believe the day before he tried to do it a couple of times and was too drunk, and he made a fool of himself.
yeah.
And he was pissing off Hooper. But actually the actor, why am I keep forgetting? Richard Dreyfuss. Which added to their tension, and it worked, because Robert Shaw was acting like an ass a lot on scene, and he thought he was doing better the more he drank, and then he got up the next morning. He said, "Wow, I really screwed that up," and he begged Spielberg to do it one more time, and that's the scene uncut. Just came in, did it, and nailed it. And it was one of those things that you could see he must have been tortured, and he came in and just said, "Okay, I'm better than this," and did it. And it's one of the best acting scenes. I agree. It's one of those things you never get up and go get a drink or go to the bathroom during that part. You
Right.
just don't.
And no sharks.
No.
So again, like to have such an emotional human scene in a horror action movie about sharks eating people, and that's the one scene that people talk about, I think you have a good movie on your hands. You know.
Mm. You can go to the bathroom and Peter Benchley's at the beach and you'll be the angle.
Oh man,
that was a terrible book. Terrible book.
Well, people don't know that, like in the book, like Hooper and Brody's wife are having an affair, and there's all this other stuff that they cut out.
Brody was from the island, so none of this magic that happens here works. And I think one of the things Spielberg said too is that he read the book and he rewrote the script because he didn't like anybody. He was rooting for the shark.
Right.
So
I'm gonna do something about this soon, but AI and CGI scares the bejesus out of me. I've been listening to Beatles songs where they like have John and Paul sing together, and John's dead. And the new Indiana Jones, from what I understand, the first third of the movie is an Indiana Jones who's 30 years old, and they just CGI'd Harrison Ford's face, and I think that's really scary, and not really artful, and that's why I like movies like Jaws. There's no CGI. They had to build this stuff. They had to not show the shark, which is great. And like in The Exorcist, you really don't see anything. In Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you never see any. There's something to be said for that, I like
Spielberg sat down with Hitchcock, didn't he? When the shark wasn't working?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this show is about human experiences and this and that, and I don't feel the human experience in a lot of what we have now. You go to a concert and people are lip syncing, even if it's Motley Crue, and nobody seems to complain. They just still buy a ticket. It doesn't work for me. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Like, if there's too much of that, I'm out, and that includes the new Indiana Jones. I don't really
Yeah.
care. And
I don't know. I think I'm still going to buy a ticket. I don't want to, but
I'll see it, but you know, it. I like human beings in my movie, and we're gonna get to the point where Transformers Part 19, starring James Dean and Marilyn Monroe, that's
right.
gonna happen because they're gonna sign off on that. The families, and they obviously have the technology, and that's a slippery.
Just like Jaws 3D, you know.
Dennis Quaid.
I've never seen any of the sequels all the way through. Just bits and pieces. I can't. It doesn't. They're different stories entirely, so it never really.
I have seen them all.
Spoke to me.
Roy Scheider is in part 2, and the son in part 2 is Lance Guest, who went on to be in The Last Starfighter, and I have played music with him. He was Johnny Cash in a Broadway show called $1 Million Quartet with a guy I made a record with named Rob Lyons. So I have like a backwards 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon connection to this. All right.
Good for you.
Thank you very much. You have your shirt and I have my music. So Jaws is great. Is it your favorite Spielberg movie?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're all very good. I just think if you look at it like, is that the movie you shut off when it's on? I always sit down when it's on. I force my kids to watch it. I actually went to the Elm Theater in Millbury when they showed it after I begged the owner. It's a private theater in Millbury, Mass. And I begged them to do it. And so my entire family showed up and we all dressed like characters in the movie. And there's pictures and video, I'm sure he'll include, of me in.
I already have that locked and loaded.
Okay, perfect. And fun fact is they had some representatives from Narragansett Beer there, and they were doing trivia. And if you got a question right, you'd get a koozie or some nonsense. And I was actually asked to stop answering so everyone else could have fun. So yeah, I'd have to say that whether I want to say it or not, it has to be my favorite Spielberg movie now.
Okay. All right. So why do you think they're making shirts and underwear and socks from Jaws? Why do you think it's become this thing?
I think it's the first, and I might not be labeling it right. It's the first reaction video, where people watch something and they react, and it's all over the internet. Like you were saying, the shark isn't there. You're watching people react to that, and I think that speaks to someone. That speaks to everybody, And I think, just as Brody speaks to me, it's about just a normal person confronting something that is just not it. It's almost supernatural. It's almost Jurassic Park or the dinosaurs. It's not something that's you can't fake out the shark. You can't. It's gonna do what it does. And so there's an inherent fear in that you can't fool him or her. You can't fool this animal. It's gonna eat people, and everybody likes going to the beach. So I think there's a reason that it speaks to everybody. And you can't help but root for Brody and Quint and Hooper, or the people identifying with Ellen, So I really like it, and I can see why it went viral. I know it's big out here. I don't know if it's big in Indiana, but in Massachusetts where it was filmed, and I can drive an hour and a half and get on a ferry, and I can go walk around where it was filmed anytime, So it's kind of part of the culture out here. Having grown up in the Cape and going to the Cape and then living out there during college, and being able to be a cop on the beach. I don't know how I can't identify with some of that.
I live by the beach where occasionally there are sharks, and I just think that's awesome. But speaking of which, it's ironic that we're doing this show today because yes, you sent it to me, but it's out there. Um, a gentleman was eaten yesterday by a tiger shark on a beach in Egypt. He's a Russian tourist that was out there, and I'd never seen that before.
Yeah.
The fact that like he's in there and like his forest is going, and you can see that. Oh wow,
But
man!
I had to take a second look at it because I wasn't sure if it was the Kittner scene,
Right, right.
you know? And so I thought that was pretty wild that
Yeah,
Spielberg got it right in 1975.
19. Well,
Yeah.
Spielberg, man, he's the guy,
Yeah.
and he has nothing to do with the new Indiana Jones, by the way.
Oh, well, that says something then.
Um, but I don't know, guys. That's Jaws. So I recommend watching Jaws on a big TV with some good speakers, and just kind of letting it go. Turn your phone off and doing the thing. Uh, no CGI. But you will believe that the shark is real, even though you never really get to see it. The one time you do get to really see a shark was filmed in Australia, and they put a little person in a cage to make it look like he was Hooper and being attacked by the shark. But then they had the cage empty, and they were just doing some testing, and the shark got caught in the cage when the little person wasn't in there, and it looked violent and badass. So they kept it in the movie and rewrote the script so that Hooper escaped the cage before the shark did that. So it was so cool that they kept it. And that's something else that, like, that's one of those amazing, wonderful mistakes from God that made the
Yeah.
movie better.
The
And
spoiler alert, in the book, Hooper dies, and you're
well,
actually pretty relieved.
and I was gonna say, if you're listening, Universal Pictures, you need to do a sequel to Jaws that ignores parts 2, 3, and 4, and it's the son of Brody, who's a Chicago cop. He's retiring, but then don't you know, it's in Amity again. It's happening. And he goes, and yep, it's all going on. And of course, he lives in Chicago because he wants to be away from the beach. You know what I mean? And he resents all the townspeople because of what happened with his dad and this and that. And there's only one person that they can get out there who has experience with that, and that is Hooper. Now, in real life, Richard Dreyfuss is a sick man. I think he has Parkinson's, and he's a cranky old dude like Robert Shaw. Have him play the part, have him be himself, and then kill him, make the movie, and the shark lives. He eats
In true
Hooper,
Stephen King fashion.
and the shark lives, and no sequels, just the shark lives, and that's the end of the movie. And I don't know if Brody's kid will. Let's let him live. He's been through enough. But I think that'd be a great sequel, since that's what we're doing. That's the new thing where they make a sequel where they ignore all the other sequels and take a fresh shit on it, like those Halloween movies that I don't understand.
My kid's in the Scream ones. My son is all into the Scream.
I saw the first one, and I think I'm good.
Yeah, there's like
Yeah.
30 of them now.
Yeah.
It's all set.
Yeah, they actually put out a new one that I wasn't even aware of, that I just saw like going through the queue, and like they made another Scream. All right.
Yeah.
They're making a, we're in toxic nostalgia where, of course, I want to go see Michael Keaton as Batman, but I'm not like, this is going to be great. But he's also doing Beetlejuice right now. Harrison Ford has to be Indiana Jones and Han Solo and Blade Runner again, and we keep on regurgitating things. So maybe Jaws should just stay where it is.
Just stay as is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's do that again. Let's do one and dones. I don't know. That's what I have for Jaws. Go watch the movie. So I know that Justin has a one-man performance of a chorus line at the local, is it a convenience store in the parking lot on Sunday afternoon? I just know
Yeah,
I had
it's a
to send him
matinee.
some leotards. So I believe
Mm,
that's on Sunday. He's playing all the parts. He's got most of the music memorized. We're just really proud of him. But no,
yeah.
you know, Justin is a sergeant in the local police department. Anything else going on that you need? I usually, this is the part where people like, obviously, as I have a show on Saturday or something, so I'm not.
Oh, no, I can't wait for my Cape Cod vacation. I'm going 4th of July week.
There you go.
So, and
Do you
I'm
hear the
renting a
act?
surfboard. So let's see what happens. Maybe this is my last interview,
Not, there's not many waves out there. I mean, for
Coast
surfing.
Guard Beach. Look it up. It's where the
All right.
sharks and the waves are. So wish me luck.
All right. So here we are now. Go to hwanow.com and you'll see all this stuff. I'm doing some speaking and some training and some consulting and doing the self-determination funding now. So we'll get that going and just do it. And there's all the other shows out there. The last one was, what did I do the last one on? It was with Avi.
Batman?
No, no. Oh, Foo Fighters. We did Rescued, and the next one will be about AI and its use in music and movies and how Terminator scared that makes me. But that's pretty much it. So I believe we're going to end with Justin doing all of uh, Sideshow Bob's song and dance stuff from the boat when he's going to kill Bart. Are you with me? You know what I'm talking about? Have you seen this?
No, I don't. And I think this is where I'm going to hit the end button, though.
Well, everybody, thanks for coming out. And
Thank you.
let's thank Sergeant Justin Benes for joining us. And what's a good Jaws quote I can end with?
Let Polly do the printing.